While Kevin stepped outside of the Whistler Hotel, a black limousine pulled up and the driver asked him to get in. They drove him to Dominic's mansion where he and Kevin discussed advanced herbal supplements. Dominic offered him a special blend that he said would increase his strength. "I've been interested in natural ways to increase my strength and focus," Dominic explained. "It's made a huge difference in my ability to succeed in business." When Kevin heard this, a faint smile appeared on his face. "If I offered you something that could help you reach your goal, how would you repay me?" "Are you joking?" Dominic retorted. "Trust me, there are no shortcuts in this process. It takes time and effort." "What if I could help give you an advantage?" Kevin said as he smiled and took out a pill of his pocket. It was one of the pills that he had made from the recipe in Officer Emmett's old book. "This combination that I discovered can be very effective." Dominic glanced at the pill in Kevin's hand. If it had the effect that Kevin claimed, it could help him reach his goals of having more energy and mental focus. In his business, you could never have enough of that. But he really didn't believe that Kevin would have access to something like this, especially based on the rumors that he'd heard about him. "What do you think?" Kevin asked with a smile. "Keep it," Dominic replied rudely. "Then I'll be on my way," Kevin said as he took the box and stood up to leave. Before Kevin got to the door, Dominic stopped him. "Is that pill of yours really that effective?" Dominic asked Kevin. It was clear that the man had his doubts, but he was intrigued enough to consider trying it. "Since you don't believe me, there is no point in trying to convince you," Kevin answered. Dominic hesitated for a moment before he continued. "How much do you want for it?" "What do you mean?" Kevin asked in shock. "I mean, what's your price?" Dominic asked again. Actually, Dominic still didn't believe that Kevin's pill would work, and knowing that Kevin was in the Jones family didn't help. But he just couldn't pass up this chance. He already took the special supplements that had been developed for him, and he watched his lifestyle. Everything he did was driven by his will to be better than his competition, some of whom could be vicious, considering the circles he moved in. Dominic had also spent years training in the martial arts, but he was also fighting against the aging process. It was worth a try. "Mr. Archer, I know you're rich and powerful, but you can't solve everything with money," Kevin said coolly. "Just name your price," Dominic said stubbornly. Kevin didn't answer right away. He thought about it for a second and said, "$500. "Okay, $500,000. Deal," Dominic said right away. Kevin couldn't help looking surprised. $500,000 for a simple herbal pill? He was afraid to tell Dominic that he actually meant just $500. Maybe Williams Media should drop the entertainment industry and switch to this, Kevin thought to himself. Dominic slowly walked up to Kevin and told him, "Money isn't a problem, but if your pill doesn't work, you know what will happen to you." The man's posture and tone were coldly threatening, but not only did Kevin not show any sign of fear, he even smiled more broadly. "Don't worry, I always make sure that my customers are happy," Kevin said as he took out the pill again. But just when Dominic reached for it, Kevin suddenly took a step back. "What's going on? Do you think I won't pay you?" Dominic snarled. "Mr. Archer, I didn't say that I would give it to you for a measly $500,000, Kevin said mischievously. "What other conditions do you have?" Dominic asked. He saw that Kevin wanted a bargain. With his other hand, Kevin pointed at the small wooden box on the coffee table. He had noticed the ring inside the box as he walked in the room earlier. For some reason, he wanted it. "You want it?" Dominic glanced at the ring and gave Kevin a strange look. He walked over to the coffee table, picked up the box, and tossed it to Kevin. "So all you really wanted was a ring?" Dominic said with a sneer. Then he called his aide over to have the money transferred to Kevin. After they'd concluded their deal, Dominic had his driver take Kevin back to the Whistler Hotel. As he rode along, Kevin looked out the window and thought about what had just happened. He just sold one of his herbal pills for $500,000 and a ring. Maybe it would be worth looking into this further. After stopping to pick up his car, Kevin headed back to his penthouse. When he got home, Lily was sitting on the sofa. As soon as she saw him step out of the elevator, she immediately stood up and exclaimed, "Kevin, you're finally back." "What's wrong? Did you really miss me that much?" Kevin replied gently. Lily rolled her eyes and said, "You came back just in time. I need you to go someplace with me." Kevin nodded and they headed down to the lobby to send for his car. Since things had been going so well, he'd added to his car collection. Lily's eyes lit up when she saw the sleek blue Pagani Roadster. As they pulled onto Lakeshore Drive, Kevin asked Lily, "Where are we going exactly?" "My mom is having a reunion with some of her school pals. When she saw that everyone else was bringing their children, she called me too," Lily replied softly. "It's at a cafe on the north side. I've got it set in my GPS. Just head north along the lake for a little while and I'll tell you where to turn left. It's near Evanston." "If your mom's classmates will be there, do you think it's okay for me to come along?" Kevin asked uneasily. "I'll understand if you don't want to see her. Just drop me off and you can head back home," Lily said sadly. Kevin smiled but didn't say anything else about it. After about a half hour, they arrived at the cafe. The event was being held in a private room in the back. When Lily entered, Dorothy was chatting with a few of her old classmates. Upon seeing her daughter, she smiled broadly. Then, when she saw Kevin, her smile immediately left her face. However, in front of so many of her old classmates, Dorothy couldn't kick Kevin out of the place. "Dorothy, is this your daughter? She's so beautiful," her friend exclaimed. A couple of her friends had heard that Lily was in charge of Brittany Davis's account at Williams Media, and they were very impressed. All the praise brought Dorothy's smile back. Then her friends introduced their own children. It seemed they were all successful business executives and doctors. Then one of Dorothy's friends looked at Kevin and asked loudly, "So who is this young man?" The woman who was asking about Kevin was Iris Reed. Ever since she and Dorothy were children, the two of them liked to show off to each other. The moment Iris saw Kevin, she'd figured out who he was. It seemed that everyone in their circles knew about Dorothy's good-for-nothing son-in-law. Everyone looked at Kevin. Dorothy stopped smiling and gave Kevin a disgusted look. Lily suddenly stood up and introduced him to everyone with a smile. "This is my husband, Kevin." "So you're Dorothy's son-in-law." Iris deliberately emphasized the word son-in-law. "He's very handsome," Iris said to Lily. Turning to Kevin, she asked, "Where do you work? What's your position?" "I work for a small company downtown," Kevin said casually. "I help my boss with his accounts," he added. He could tell what Iris was trying to do, but he didn't want to play her game. "A small company should have a name, shouldn't it? If you help your boss with his accounts, you must have some kind of title." Iris wouldn't drop the subject until she was satisfied. "I guess you could call me a clerk," Kevin replied modestly. Nobody was impressed, and it showed on their faces. "I guess it doesn't matter that you're just a clerk. In any case, Lily has a powerful position at Williams Media. Even if you don't earn a lot, she can still support you," Iris said proudly. She knew that she'd beaten Dorothy this time. Dorothy wanted to go over and tell Kevin off, but she couldn't do that in front of all of her friends. Lily looked uncomfortable and began to regret bringing Kevin along. Then Iris stood up and waved at a young man on the other side of the room. "I'd like to announce a joyous occasion. On the 26th of this month, my daughter Rose will be getting married," Iris said proudly. "Vito Booker, please stand up and introduce yourself to my friends." Iris took her seat and a man quickly stood up. He politely waved at everyone. "Hi, my name is Vito. I'm currently the general manager at the KWTD Corporation Chicago branch." When he said this, everyone was clearly impressed. One of Dorothy's friends gushed. "The KWTD Corporation? That's one of the top 3 companies in the country." Another one added, "Iris, I'm so excited for you. He's already a manager at KWTD, and at such a young age. Rose will be set for life." The more Iris smiled, the more Dorothy frowned. Even though Lily had a promising career, Iris's son-in-law was way better than Dorothy's. It looked like Iris had won today's private little competition. Suddenly, one of them asked, "Vito, how's it being a general manager at the KWTD Corporation?" "The work can be exhausting, but as I move up the corporate ladder, I have greater and greater responsibility. I don't have much free time right now, but that's because I manage a few hundred people," Vito said very modestly. He smiled at Iris and said, "Mom, for the wedding between Rose and me, I've arranged for a limo that's worth $500,000. What do you think?" They seemed to find this almost as impressive as his position at KWTD. "That's fine with me, Vito. I'll leave all the decisions up to you and Rose," Iris replied. She was trying to act humble, but you could see the pride in her eyes. "I know what you mean, Iris," Lily commented. "No matter how good a car is, it's just a means of transportation, from point A to point B." Then she turned around and asked Kevin, "Don't you think so?" Before coming to the reunion, Iris had asked Vito to help her embarrass Dorothy's son-in-law, so Vito naturally couldn't let an opportunity like this pass him by. Everyone's aesthetic sense is different. If you think that a car is just a means of transportation, then it's just a tool, Kevin said with a smile. "Then what kind of car do you drive?" Vito asked Kevin. He was sure he'd win this round. They all turned to Kevin. Everyone seemed to think that Vito was in another league and Kevin couldn't possibly compare with him. And Dorothy was ready for her friend Iris to beat her again. "My ride?" Kevin slightly raised his eyebrows and said, "It's just a Pagani Roadster, nothing special, basic blue color." Vito looked at Kevin in disbelief. "A Pagani? That's worth at least $3 million. Everyone in the room gasped when they heard this. Lily coughed on the pastry she was eating and reached for a sip of coffee. Iris recovered from her shock and said, "Dorothy, I really didn't know that Lily treated her husband so well. What a lovely gift she bought for him." She didn't say it out loud, but Iris thought that Kevin was just a gigolo who was mooching off her friend's daughter. Lily probably got her husband the car just to make Dorothy look good. However, when Kevin heard that, he said, "Actually, the car is my boss's. It wasn't Lily who bought it for me." When he said this, everyone laughed. Dorothy couldn't take it any longer. She wanted to chase Kevin out into the street. But Kevin interrupted the laughter to clarify what he just said. "So, I didn't buy the car, but my boss gave it to me because I'm doing so well in the company." That seemed to shut everyone up. They all looked at Kevin in amazement. They couldn't imagine what kind of boss would give a $3 million sports car to an ordinary employee. "Kevin, may I ask where you work? What's your boss's name?" Vito asked in disbelief. Kevin looked at Vito with a smile and said, "My boss's last name is Dawn." Vito dropped the subject. This conversation definitely wasn't helping his mother-in-law. Besides, he didn't believe that Kevin really had such a generous boss. He was obviously just bragging to look good. So Vito changed the subject and turned to Iris. "Mom, this is a gift I got for you a while ago. Because of all that was going on at work, I never had a chance to give it to you." He reached under the table and took out a gift box, then he said to her, "This is a small token of my appreciation, and I'd like to tell you that you can rest assured that after Rose and I get married, I'll always treat her well." This was just too much for Dorothy to bear. What would happen next? "Vito, we're family now. There's no need for you to give me anything." While Iris was saying this, she reached out and took the gift. Her friends practically begged her to open the present. As they all watched enviously, Iris happily opened the package. When she pulled out the gift, everyone immediately gasped in surprise. Inside the box was a lustrous green emerald bracelet. They couldn't believe their eyes. One of her friends exclaimed, "Iris, your son-in-law is so generous." Iris was also very surprised and asked Vito, "This bracelet is beautiful. I hope it didn't cost you too much." "Not much, Mom, just about $30,000, Vito smiled and said, "But the price isn't important. What matters is whether you like it." Lily looked at the expensive emerald bracelet and was a little envious herself. Iris was ecstatic but pretended to protest. "No, Vito, this is way too expensive. I can't accept this gift. You should give it to Rose." Her friend's jealous looks filled her with pride. "Mom, it's only $30,000. How is that expensive? Why don't you let your friends decide if it looks good on you? Vito smiled casually and added, If Rose likes it, I'll buy one for her too. Okay, since you insist, I'll keep it, Iris said as she excitedly put the bracelet on her wrist. Vito, you're more than a son-in-law to me, Iris said very seriously. You're a wonderful young man and a welcome addition to our family. After Iris said this, she gave Dorothy a haughty look. Lily understood exactly what Iris meant by this. Vito was the general manager of KWTD Corporation's Chicago branch, and Kevin was only a clerk in a small company. There was no comparison between the two. Kevin suddenly put down his coffee and got up to leave the room. Dorothy let out a little snort. She'd already decided that, after this embarrassing afternoon, she would definitely let Lily and Kevin divorce. Dorothy, why did your son-in-law just leave? Iris asked in a tone that was full of ridicule. Maybe he has to get back to work, Dorothy replied coldly. He's just a clerk. What could he possibly be so busy with? Could it be that his tiny little company doesn't allow him to take a day off? Iris said in disdain. A few of the other women heard this and couldn't help but laugh. Now that there wasn't anyone there to ridicule, their little gathering started to get a little boring. Just as some of them were thinking of leaving, Kevin came back with a red gift bag in his hand. Why did you come back? Haven't you had enough? Dorothy asked him in disgust. Lily sighed and walked over to Kevin. She whispered in his ear, Just wait for me downstairs. There's no need to stay here and put up with this. But Kevin didn't say anything. He just gave her an enigmatic smile. Before they entered the cafe earlier, he'd already expected something like this would happen. So he texted Adriana and asked her to buy something special for him to present to his mother-in-law. Adriana had spent a lot of time in the upper class and knew how competitive some people could be. Kevin trusted her sense of taste, so he figured the gift couldn't be too bad. Kevin slowly placed the bag in front of Dorothy and said in his sweetest voice, Mom, Lily and I have been married for a long time now, and I've never given you anything decent. This gathering seems like a nice place to present you with something to show you how much you mean to me. Most of them figured that Kevin, who was just a lowly clerk at a small company, had bought her something from the supermarket across the street. It couldn't be nearly as nice as the expensive bracelet that Vito had just given to Iris. Dorothy could hear her friends whispering to each other and hesitated to open the gift bag while they watched. She couldn't handle any more embarrassment today. When she pulled the gift box out of the red bag, it was obvious that it came from an expensive store, not one of those kiosks at the mall. Even before Dorothy opened the box, they all knew that whatever it wasn't a knockoff. Vito saw this as another opportunity to try and embarrass Kevin. The strategy hadn't gone too well when he asked about Kevin's car, but it was certain that this gift wouldn't be as expensive as the one he'd just given to Iris. How did you find that so quickly, Kevin? Did you just grab it from one of the shops down the street? Before Kevin could say anything, Iris stood up and said, Quick, Dorothy, open it up. We're dying to see what your son-in-law just bought for you. The rest of her friends joined in, egging her on. Dorothy took a deep breath and looked anxiously at the box. Finally, she made up her mind. This would probably be another disappointment in her competition with Iris, but with all the peer pressure, she had no choice. As soon as she got home, she was definitely going to make Lily divorce Kevin. The room grew silent as she opened the velvet box to reveal a sparkling diamond necklace. Kevin, is this really from you? Dorothy asked in disbelief. Do you like it, Mom? Kevin asked with a smile. But Dorothy's friend still didn't believe that it was a genuine diamond necklace. How could someone like Kevin afford to buy something so expensive? On the other hand, it sure looked like the diamonds were real. Vito felt his mouth go dry as he looked on. Even from where he was sitting, he could tell that the diamonds were genuine, not cubic zirconia like you could get at a department store. Who is this guy? He's not what I expected from all the rumors I've been hearing, Vito thought to himself. Lily got over her initial shock and tugged on Kevin's sleeve. Tell me honestly, where did you get this necklace? A friend of mine gave it to me, Kevin said very honestly. When Dorothy heard this, she immediately wanted to throw the necklace in the trash. How could Kevin make her look like a fool? Just then, one of Dorothy's classmates walked over to her and asked, "May I take a look at your necklace? I just studied jewelry appraisal in college, and I'd be happy to give you my opinion." "Oh, all right," Dorothy said hesitantly before handing the necklace over to her. A few minutes later, the woman raised her head and then gave Kevin a puzzled look. She said, "In my opinion, these diamonds are all real. Judging from the color and size of them, they're all top quality. Also, the cut and polish are exquisite. Obviously the work of an expert." She looked at the necklace again and added, "I believe that this necklace has a value of at least $200,000. Iris and Vito felt very awkward when they heard this. The $30,000 emerald bracelet that he'd given his new mother-in-law paled in comparison. "Kevin, are you really giving this necklace to me?" Dorothy was so shocked that she couldn't even speak clearly. Kevin didn't answer Dorothy's question. Instead, he asked her, "Mom, do you really like it?" "Of course I like it," Dorothy answered without thinking. "I'm happy that you like it," Kevin said with a pleasant smile. Dorothy was so excited that she got a little short of breath. As everyone watched, she carefully put the necklace on. Her friends were envious and started commenting on how lucky she and Lily were to have Kevin in their family. One of them even invited them to visit them at their home. Dorothy was happy to have everyone sucking up to her for a change. Better yet, Iris and Vito were no longer the center of attention. Lily and Kevin left soon after and drove back to Corwin Tower. While they were heading down Lakeshore Drive, Lily looked sideways at Kevin and asked him, "I'm very curious to know what kind of friend would give you a necklace that's worth over $200,000. "Oh, it's just a friend who borrowed some money from me a while back," Kevin answered carefully. Lily thought about this and said, "Since he gave us such a valuable gift, we should at least invite him to dinner." Kevin wasn't sure if it was a good idea for Lily to meet his best friends yet, so he explained. "He was just passing through town and working abroad for a couple years. I think he's already headed back." Lily could tell that Kevin was hiding something, but she didn't want to start an argument. She just shook her head silently. When they returned home, Lily went to her room to rest. Kevin went to the study and pulled out the box that Dominic gave him and looked at the special blend of supplements. $500,000 for a single herbal pill. This guy's definitely wealthy, Kevin thought to himself. Then he opened one of the books that Officer Emmett had let him borrow and flipped through it. He found the instructions for putting the ingredients Dominic had given him into an energy drink. After carefully mixing everything and drinking the entire glass, Kevin sat down on the living room couch. He didn't feel any different at first, but about a half an hour later, he let out a long breath and felt a surge of energy. Even though it had been a long day, he changed his clothes and went to his home gym for a bodyweight workout. It was refreshing to do this in the comfort of his apartment, looking out on the park from the top of Corwin Tower. The next morning, Lily got a call from her family. They were having another meeting. She went down to the lobby and took a taxi to the Jones mansion. A little while later, Kevin woke up from a very deep and refreshing night of sleep and went to his office at Williams Media. Kevin sat back in his comfortable office chair and murmured to himself, "That blend Dominic gave me really was potent. I feel better already." Meanwhile, the Jones family was meeting to discuss how to move forward after all the upheaval in the past few days. Grandma Jones looked around the room at all the eager faces and said, "Now that the KWTD Corporation has invested $300 million to help us get through this crisis, we only have 40% of our company's shares left. Do any of you have some ideas about what we should do next?" They were unsure how to deal with this. While KWTD had saved them from bankruptcy, they didn't stand to see much profit at the end of the year. While they were wrestling with this dilemma, Jason stood up and shared what was on his mind. "Grandma, I've got an idea. If it succeeds, the Jones family will be back on top in no time," Jason said confidently. "What do you propose?" Grandma Jones asked. Jason explained, "Grandma, now that we've turned over 60% of our shares to KWTD, we may never be able to recover them. So Tyler Dawn now has controlling interest in our company. My suggestion is to forget about the 60% that we've lost. Let's sell off 10% of the shares we have left. We can use that as seed money to start a new company. That's how we'll make our comeback." "That sounds like a good idea, but who would be willing to buy any of our shares?" Grandma Jones asked worriedly. "Grandma, don't forget that everyone knows that we're affiliated with KWTD Corporation now," Jason said with a smile. "When someone buys our shares, it's like they're forming a business relationship with KWTD. We can use that to our advantage." One of his uncles had his doubts. "But who would be able to buy our shares? Even 10% is a lot of money." They all looked back at Jason, wondering if he already had a plan. "Don't worry, everyone. I've been thinking about this for a while now," Jason said proudly. "I have a friend who definitely has enough money to buy 10% of our shares." "And who might this friend of yours be?" Grandma Jones asked. "Grandma, have you ever heard of Lucas Merriweather?" Jason asked with a smile. Suddenly, the entire room filled with chatter. They had all heard of the 5-time world champion of mixed martial arts. Everyone was surprised that Jason knew him personally. After all, he had dozens of martial arts schools, not just in Chicago, but across the country. Lily sat calmly while the relatives around her were getting excited about this golden opportunity. But she felt that she should advise her grandmother not to sell the shares. However, Lily was too shy to speak up. After all, the whole mess had been caused by her father and his foolish investment advice. "All right, Jason, call Mr. Merriweather right away," Grandma Jones exclaimed with a joyful expression on her face. Jason nodded, took out his phone, and called his friend. Because he was a show-off, Jason put his phone on speaker mode. "Hello, is this Mr. Merriweather?" Jason said proudly. "This is Jason. Are you free right now? I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Lucas Merriweather's voice blared from the speaker.
"Jason, how are you? I always have time for you. What's going on?"
"Mr. Merriweather, the Jones family is planning to sell some shares. We'd rather sell them to you than to some strangers, so I'm wondering if you're interested." Jason felt very important as he saw the amazed look on his relatives' faces.
"How can I turn down an offer like that?"
Merriweather said candidly.
"Why don't we find a place to meet face to face? As it happens, I'm in Chicago right now."
"That's great, Lucas. Have your driver take you to the Jones mansion. I'll be waiting for you here." Jason ended the call and turned around to speak to his grandmother. "Grandma, it's settled. Mr. Merriweather will be here in a little while." "You've shown yourself to be very useful, Jason," Grandma Jones said with a smile. "If you succeed in making this deal with Mr. Merriweather, I'll make sure you're next in line to lead the family business." "Thank you, Grandma," Jason replied sincerely. Inside, he was jumping for joy. Then he gave Lily a proud look that told her it was thanks to her father Oliver that he had this chance to get back in Grandma's good graces. About a half an hour later, 2 long limos pulled up at the mansion's entrance. A moment later, the family butler announced, "Mrs. Jones, Lucas Merriweather has arrived." As the tall, powerful man walked into the reception room followed by his assistants, Jason quickly brought Grandma Jones to welcome them. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Jason said sincerely. "How could I make a good friend wait?" Merriweather said graciously. "I appreciate your confidence in me. Please let me introduce you to my grandmother, the Jones Company's CEO," Jason said as he shook Merriweather's hand warmly. "Mrs. Jones," Merriweather said as he offered his hand to greet her. "Welcome to the Jones mansion, Mr. Merriweather." Grandma had a strange feeling as she shook his hand, but she didn't pay attention to it. Then she gestured to the comfortable leather armchair next to hers and said, "Please have a seat." After Merriweather sat down, the Jones family members who were in the room sat quietly as they waited to see the outcome of this meeting. Next, Jason gave Merriweather a detailed explanation of his plan and how he hoped to get his support for it. "Unbelievable," Merriweather said angrily. "The KWTD Corporation really made this outrageous offer?" "That's right, Lucas, and that's why my family wants to sell you our shares," Jason agreed. Meriwether thought for a while before he made his offer. I'm willing to pay $150 million for 10% of the Jones Company shares. This announcement shocked all of them, including Grandma Jones. She couldn't hide her joy. Grandma had been expecting Meriwether to offer half that amount at most. Jason was also stunned. Mr. Meriwether, are you serious? We can't thank you enough for this generous offer. No need to thank me, Meriwether replied with a strange expression on his face. Money's not a problem for me, but I do have one condition. What condition is that, Mr. Meriwether? Grandma Jones asked him without thinking. It's very simple, he replied calmly. Then he looked around the room like he was searching for something or someone. Jason has told me about a cousin of his who is young and very beautiful. I've admired her for a long time. So, Mrs. Jones, I'm not here to just talk about shares. I hope you will give me your blessing to marry your granddaughter, Meriwether said with a smile. This was unexpected, to say the least. The Joneses weren't sure what to think. It was unusual to make this kind of request in the middle of a business deal. What made things even more awkward was that everyone knew that the most beautiful person in the entire family was Lily, but she was already married. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Jason said with some hesitation. Jason, how could you forget? I've admired your cousin Lily for a long time, Meriwether smiled casually. Before Jason could answer, Lily stood up and said emphatically, Mr. Meriwether, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm already married. Yes, Mr. Meriwether, Lily has been married for almost 3 years. Perhaps you'll consider one of my other granddaughters, Grandma Jones said awkwardly. Meriwether smiled and replied, To tell you the truth, I only came here for Lily. Otherwise, I wouldn't be negotiating with you today. Then he added, She can always get a divorce, can't she? Grandma Jones's mood had changed from joy to disappointment. Mr. Meriwether, you can't be serious. Do I look like I'm joking? He replied sternly. Jason was at a loss for words. He hadn't expected his friend to do something like this. Then Meriwether sneered and said, Miss Jones, you really ought to consider my offer. I've already had my advisors investigate the situation. Lily's husband is in no position to help your family get through this crisis. He paused for a moment and added, You have no choice but to sell me your shares. Do you think there's anyone else in all of Chicago who'd be willing to pay $150 million for your useless shares? But Lily is already married. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to offer her to you as part of a business deal, Grandma Jones explained haltingly. If $150 million isn't enough, I'll make it $225 million, Meriwether countered as he smiled and looked at Lily. According to my sources, her husband hasn't touched her in 3 years. Grandma Jones couldn't bear to hear this. Her family listened in complete silence. But part of her was actually weighing the offer. After all, Meriwether was willing to give them over $200 million, while Kevin had contributed nothing to the family in 3 years. And Lily's life would certainly be much easier if she were married to Meriwether. Then he walked slowly over to Lily and said, We don't know each other, but I could learn to love you. When he finished speaking, Meriwether grabbed Lily by the wrist. Mr. Meriwether, please let go. Lily struggled hard, but she wasn't strong enough to break his grip. Your whole family is okay with this, just ask them, he said as his mouth broke into an evil smile. The whole family was shocked by the way this promising business deal had turned ugly so quickly. Let go of my daughter right now, Dorothy roared angrily. Even though she didn't like Kevin, he was still her daughter's husband. Everyone else joined in and demanded that Meriwether let Lily go. After all, he was in their home, not one of his martial arts schools. This was outrageous behavior. Lily didn't know where she got the strength, but she managed to push the man away. Meriwether turned around and looked at Grandma Jones, who was so angry she was trembling. Then he spoke to Jason. I thought you asked me here in good faith. I'm very disappointed in you. Mr. Meriwether, please don't be angry, Jason pleaded. Then he turned around and said loudly to Grandma Jones, I think you should marry Lily to Lucas. We can always offer Kevin some money to settle with him. But Grandma Jones didn't respond, so Jason tried again. Grandma, we can't let the entire family be ruined just to save Lily's reputation. Grandma Jones was at a loss for words. None of them knew what to say to the man. Seeing Merriweather and his bodyguards, Lily lost all hope and gave up. Tears silently flowed down her cheeks. In the middle of all of this, the first person Lily thought of was actually Kevin. Kevin, please come quickly and save me from this beast, Lily prayed. Just as Merriweather was leaning down to kiss her, a powerful hand grabbed his neck from behind. This made him furious. He let go of Lily, and as he turned around, he cursed. Who the hell did that? Get away from my wife, Kevin growled at him. Kevin, please save me, Lily said tearfully when she saw Kevin. So, you're Lily's piece of crap husband? Merriweather said with disdain. This is none of your damn business. Lily's mine now. The anger flashed in Kevin's eyes as he grabbed Merriweather's arm and pulled him away from Lily. Then he threw the big man 10 feet away. The room shook as Merriweather's body hit the wall. The onlookers were shocked to see Kevin's show of strength, but they knew that Merriweather was a highly trained fighter. Kevin was definitely in trouble now. Do you have some kind of death wish? Merriweather bellowed as he stared at Kevin coldly. Well, as long as you're here today, you'll save me the trouble of hunting you down. Then he rushed toward Kevin like some kind of ferocious animal. Everyone was certain that Kevin was a goner now. Not even his friends could save him. Lily shouted, Kevin, run! You can't beat him! They all watched helplessly as the powerful man attacked Kevin. Kevin and Merriweather were fighting right in the main reception room of the Jones mansion. Although Kevin had taught Jason a lesson at Grandma Jones's birthday party, Lily doubted that her husband could beat Merriweather. But it made her feel good to see Kevin stand up for her. Hurry, Kevin, get out! Lily shouted as she ran to grab her phone and call the police. Kevin acted as if he didn't hear Lily's warning and just stood there, calmly facing Merriweather. Once her phone connected, Lily said, This is an emergency. Come to the Jones family mansion right away. There's a terrible fight. Lily's voice trailed off. Over the phone, the police operator could hear the fight going on in the background. The Joneses were all amazed to see Kevin standing there, tightly clenching Merriweather's fist. With your punching speed, you should consider going into the martial arts, Kevin said sarcastically. How dare you mock me? Merriweather snarled. While Kevin was holding his fist, Merriweather turned and gave him a powerful kick to the head. The 911 operator told Lily,
That sounds dangerous. Please keep at a safe distance. Who's fighting?
The MMA champion Lucas Merriweather is attacking my husband, Lily cried. Everyone closed their eyes. They were sure that Kevin would be severely injured by the kick. A cold smile emerged on Merriweather's face. He had used this move to knock out a lot of his opponents. But in the next second, to everyone's surprise, Kevin calmly reached out his left hand and grabbed Merriweather by the ankle. When he squeezed his hands together, Merriweather screamed in agony. Then Kevin grabbed Merriweather's hands and feet and threw him onto the ground with a dull thud. Everyone there, including Merriweather's bodyguards, were stunned. They couldn't believe he had beaten the world champion so easily. Before Merriweather could get up from the floor, Kevin put his foot on the man's chest, pinning him down. So what were you saying about my wife, you arrogant bastard? Kevin said as he leaned down and slapped Merriweather on the face. Stop hitting me! I was wrong, Merriweather begged him. So you admit that you were wrong. Then maybe you should apologize, Kevin said coldly. All right, I apologize, Merriweather said in a muffled voice. Not to me, to Lily. After Kevin finished speaking, he glared at Merriweather's bodyguards. None of them dared to move. They knew that they couldn't beat their boss even if they joined forces. Seeing how easily Kevin had defeated Merriweather, how could they possibly stand a chance? Never, Merriweather said bitterly. Never? Kevin grabbed the man by the collar and raised his palm to slap him. This is unbelievable, they all thought. Was this really happening? Lily gulped in disbelief. She'd been married to Kevin for 3 years and had never seen the side of him. Kevin gave Meriwether another punch to the jaw. It looked like he may have knocked out a couple of his teeth. "We're still waiting," Kevin said threateningly. I'll do it, just stop hitting me," Meriwether begged. Kevin turned the big man to face Lily. As everyone looked on in shock, Meriwether said, "Lily, Mrs. Williams, I'm sorry, I should never have done this. Please forgive me." Before Lily could say anything, Kevin said, "I'll call the police now and let them handle this." "I've already called the police," Lily said softly. Kevin nodded and lowered Meriwether to the floor. Then he turned around and looked at the man's bodyguards. He ordered them, "Come over and sit on the floor with your hands on your heads." They frowned and looked at each other. "What are you waiting for? Come over here and sit down next to me," Meriwether shouted at them. "Yes, sir," they replied and sat on the floor to wait for the police. A few minutes later, they all heard sirens approaching the mansion. Officer Emmett walked in, followed by several backup officers. "What's this all about?" she asked. Then she looked at Meriwether and his bodyguard sitting quietly on the floor with their hands on their heads. "What's going on? Why are these guys sitting on the floor?" Officer Emmett frowned and asked. "Officer, please help me." Before Meriwether could finish what he was saying, Kevin grabbed him by his throat. "Kevin, what are you doing? You can't do that in front of a police officer," Officer Emmett said. "Well, Officer Emmett, I've already guessed what Meriwether was about to say. He just wants to complain. I figured I'd save you some time and just make him shut up," Kevin said calmly. Officer Emmett rolled her eyes at Kevin. Then she turned to the other officers and asked them to have 2 more cars sent over. She looked at the Jones family standing in a big circle, then pointed at the men sitting on the floor and added, "Take these guys back to the station for questioning." After Officer Emmett finished giving these instructions, she turned to Kevin and Lily and said, "Please follow me." "Of course, Officer Emmett," Kevin said as he shrugged his shoulders. Then he hesitated for a moment before saying, "Does my wife have to go?" She was a little frightened by all of this, and she should go get some rest. "It's fine. I can go with you," Lily said worriedly. Officer Emmett said, "I'll be in touch, ma'am." Then she nodded at Kevin and said, "Let's go." Kevin turned to Lily and said, "Go home and rest up. I'll be back soon." Then he and Officer Emmett left the Jones mansion. Kevin sat down in the front seat of Officer Emmett's cruiser. She put it into gear and drove through the gate toward the city. After about 10 minutes, Kevin asked her, "Aren't we going to the police station?" He knew that they weren't in the right neighborhood. "You know the police station pretty well, don't you?" Officer Emmett gave him an odd look and then smiled. "Don't look at me like that," he said. "I drive by the police station all the time, and this is definitely the wrong direction. What's going on?" "Forget it. I won't tease you anymore," she said in a slightly playful tone. "Actually, I already know what kind of guy Meriwether is. I can find out all I need to know from the Jones family." Suddenly, Kevin's eyes lit up. "That pill I made actually helped you, didn't it?" "How did you guess?" she said in surprise. "I'm not just another pretty face," Kevin joked. "Don't flatter yourself," Officer Emmett said as she went back to looking at the road. As they got closer to downtown, the traffic started to back up, even though it wasn't rush hour yet. Officer Emmett slowed down and squeezed into the next lane over. "Kevin," she said, "do you have another one of those pills?" "Officer Emmett, what kind of man do you think I am? I don't just go around handing out pills," Kevin replied as he smiled casually. "I really didn't expect it to have such a great effect on me. A few hours after you left, I started to feel fantastic," Officer Emmett said enthusiastically. "If you have one left over, may I have it?" she asked awkwardly. "The supplement has already done its work. Why would you want another one?" Kevin asked. He found her request puzzling. She didn't strike him as someone who was greedy. "I have a very good friend who needs some help," she explained. She knew that something this miraculous would be difficult to make herself. Somehow, Kevin seemed to have a gift for it. "I'm not sure I can help," he explained honestly. "I understand," Officer Emmett answered. He could see in her eyes that she was disappointed. However, there may be a way for me to help your friend, Kevin said with a smile. How? Officer Emmett's face lit up. Kevin glanced at her first, then asked, Do you know Dominic Archer? I sold him one a couple of days ago. You mean you want me to pay for it? Officer Emmett asked. Kevin slowly nodded his head. He hadn't heard a lot of the ingredients in the recipes that he'd found. If he wanted to keep experimenting with this herbal medicine, he'd need a lot of money. But he couldn't use any of the Williams Media or KWTD Corporation assets to pay for his personal research. He wanted those companies to continue to grow because he knew he'd need them in the future. So he had to fund the project himself. As long as your friend is willing to pay, I can do it, Kevin said calmly. Don't worry, money isn't a problem. My friend is pretty well off. Then Officer Emmett asked curiously, How do you know Dominic Archer? And how much did he pay for your pill? How did I meet him? I'd rather not talk about it, Kevin casually said. But he didn't pay much, just $500,000. Officer Emmett slammed on the brakes when she heard this. How much did he pay? Officer Emmett repeated. $500,000. Didn't you say that your friend could afford it? Kevin said with a smirk. Of course, Kevin knew very well that Officer Emmett's friend would never be able to afford to pay that much. After all, hardly anyone in the whole city was as rich as Dominic. As Kevin expected, Officer Emmett didn't say anything else. She just quietly followed the car in front of them and slowly crossed the next intersection. Let's go to the police station for a statement, Officer Emmett said blankly. Officer Emmett, I consider us to be friends. Why don't I give your friend a 20% discount? Kevin said nervously. Was Kevin really afraid of going down to the police station? Of course not. He knew that Meriwether was completely in the wrong, although he may have gotten a little carried away defending Lily against the bully. Kevin was acting anxious so he could give Officer Emmett a way out. A 20% discount? Isn't that still a few $100,000? Officer Emmett said sadly. Kevin, are you teasing me? Are you having fun? He knew that she couldn't possibly afford to help her friend no matter how generous she was. Forget about it, Officer Emmett. I value our relationship. In the short time I've known you, we've faced a lot together, even fought side by side. I'll just give you the pill, Kevin said gently. Really? Officer Emmett said as she pulled to the curb and slammed on the brakes again. Her sudden move caught Kevin off guard and he grabbed the armrest. Officer Emmett, can you please be more careful? I can give you the pill, but I do have one condition, Kevin said nonchalantly. I knew it. I already told you I can't afford it, so if you're asking for any money, we can forget about the whole thing, Officer Emmett said bluntly. Don't worry. The condition I want is very simple. All you have to do is say please, Kevin said with a smile. Officer Emmett turned her head and continued driving. A few minutes later, she said, Okay, please give me the pill for my friend. Wasn't that easy? Kevin said with a smile. Then he took a small bottle out of his pocket and poured the pill out into his hand. Thank you, Officer Emmett said gratefully. Then she quickly took out her phone and called her friend. Hello? Where are you right now? I've got the pill. She made a U-turn and started to head back out of the city. Where are we going now? Kevin wondered. As Officer Emmett was driving Kevin away from the Jones family mansion in her squad car, she decided to ask him for a favor. She needed one of the herbal pills that he'd made so she could help a friend. When Kevin finally agreed, she picked up her phone and called her friend to say she was on the way. All right, wait for me there, Officer Emmett said as she hung up the phone. She turned her head and said to Kevin, My friend is having breakfast at the Whistler Hotel. We're almost there, so let's head over to meet him. After hearing Officer Emmett say that her friend was having breakfast at the Whistler, Kevin had an idea of who it was. Anybody who has such an expensive breakfast has to be a snob, Kevin commented. Officer Emmett was surprised to hear this. Realizing that something was wrong, she said, Kevin, my friend is just a little spoiled by his family, so sometimes he splurges. Please promise me you won't bicker with him, okay? All right, I'll go with you, but let's get one thing clear first. If this friend of yours isn't polite, I may not just hand over the pill, Kevin said calmly. When they arrived at the Whistler Hotel, they took the elevator up to a private room on the 3rd floor. As he opened the door, Kevin noticed that there were 5 or 6 couples in the room. Based on the way they were dressed, Kevin was even more certain that they were just snobs who had nothing to do all day long. A well-dressed man walked up and stood next to Officer Emmett. It was Sherwin Blair. He took her by the hand and introduced her to everyone. "I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Kelly Emmett. I'm sorry," he paused for a moment, "Lieutenant Emmett, as you can see by her uniform." One of his table companions said, "Delighted to meet you. When are you getting married? We can't wait to attend your wedding." Soon, but let me tell you something else," he replied. "Today we have another surprise. Mrs. Blair just brought me a miraculous herbal pill," he said happily. "Sherwin, how many times have I told you we aren't married yet, so it's too soon for anyone to call me Mrs. Blair," Officer Emmett said with a hint of irritation in her voice. "My fiancée is just a little nervous. Please, don't be offended," Blair replied. Just then, one of them looked at Kevin and asked abruptly, "Isn't this the guy who married into the Jones family? What's he doing here?" There was an awkward pause, then Blair turned toward Kevin and sneered. "Are you lost? This is the Whistler Hotel, you know. They don't just let anyone come in here." "Then why can't I be here?" Kevin asked with a smirk. "Everyone knows that the Jones family is desperate to find people to buy shares in their company. They'll be bankrupt soon, and there's nothing they can do about it," Blair said in a snobby tone. Then he glanced at Kevin and added, "Can you even afford to eat here? You probably should have stayed at home." "Shut up, Sherwin," Officer Emmett said angrily. "Kevin was kind enough to bring you the herbal remedy I was telling you about." Everyone in the room was shocked when they heard that. They really didn't expect Blair's girlfriend to defend Kevin. What shocked them even more was that Kevin actually had an herbal supplement that could help Blair. It was a rare skill, and there were a lot of rich people who were desperate to have access to the latest breakthroughs. They really doubted that Kevin had the ability to help their friend. "Kelly, you can be so gullible. Kevin is obviously playing you for a fool," Blair said arrogantly. "Think about it. How could someone like him have any knowledge or skill to make an effective herbal remedy?" Before Officer Emmett could respond, Kevin spoke up. "Because Officer Emmett and I are friends, I was going to give you a good price, but now I've decided to increase it by 30%. "Kevin, what are you doing?" Officer Emmett asked him in shock. She knew how much Dominic had paid Kevin. An increase of 30% would be a fortune. Kevin shook his head and answered her, "I haven't done anything to these people, and they're treating me so rudely. What did you expect?" "So what? I'm not going to waste any more time talking to someone like you," Blair said contemptuously. "Listen carefully," he said with a sneer. "The only reason Kelly has made any progress is her training and her healthy diet. It has nothing to do with that stupid pill of yours. I'm warning you right now," he continued angrily. "If you do something like this again, you won't like what happens." "Sherwin, why are you saying this? Kevin is my friend, and I'm the one who brought him here today," Officer Emmett asked him. She was getting very upset. "Kelly, Kevin is obviously a liar. Don't be fooled. Your sudden improvement has nothing to do with him," he answered firmly. Kevin took a deep breath. He couldn't believe Officer Emmett had such a jerk for a boyfriend. "Okay, since her progress had nothing to do with me, then I guess I'll leave." Kevin turned around and started to head for the door. "Stop! Who said you could leave without asking for permission?" Blair snapped at him. "Enough! Sherwin, you're hurting my feelings," Officer Emmett said angrily. Just then, the door opened from the outside. 5 or 6 waiters came in carrying enormous trays. They were used to scenes like this and started serving the meal like nothing was wrong. Blair gave Officer Emmett a bewildered look. He didn't know why his girlfriend trusted Kevin so much, but he figured it wouldn't be worth it to have a fight with her over some useless loser. So Blair took a deep breath and said, All right, Kelly, he can eat with us today, but I'm only doing this as a favor to you." Seeing Blair give in, Officer Emmett's expression softened up a little. Then she turned to Kevin and said apologetically, "I know this didn't get off to a great start, but can you please stay for the meal? As a favor to me? I'll definitely make sure Sherwin apologizes to you later." "All right, I'll stay." Kevin nodded slightly as he tossed the herbal pill to Officer Emmett. "Thank you," she said gratefully. Then Officer Emmett gestured for Kevin to take a seat. She turned to Blair and said, "Just trust me, okay? Take this." Blair didn't want to risk making her angry again, so he took the pill and swallowed it. Then he stood up with a glass of rosé in his hand and said, "Kevin, at Kelly's request, you're our guest today." Kevin thought this was pretty funny. He could eat at the Whistler Hotel any time that he wanted. Blair saw that this hadn't gotten much of a reaction from Kevin. He sneered and went on with his insulting toast. "The Jones family is on the verge of bankruptcy, so as a favor to Kelly, I can instruct our company to hire you on as a building custodian. Starting salary would be, let's say, $1,500 a month. How about it?" The whole room burst into laughter. One of the guests said, "You're too generous, Mr. Blair. Just make sure he can do a good job cleaning the restrooms." Officer Emmett was embarrassed. She suddenly felt guilty that she'd brought Kevin along. If she hadn't insisted, Kevin wouldn't be in this humiliating situation. "So, you're Sherwin Blair," Kevin said with a mocking smile. "Hardly anyone has heard of you. Do you really think you're a big shot?" The room got quiet all of a sudden. They all knew that Blair was hot-tempered and wouldn't put up with Kevin's insults. But Blair held his anger in so he wouldn't upset Officer Emmett. He shouted at Kevin, "So this is how you respond to my generous offer? You really are a lowlife." "Look who's calling me a lowlife. You should take a good look in the mirror," Kevin replied spitefully. Blair threw his wine glass on the floor. Shards of glass went everywhere. Just as he was about to make a move toward Kevin, the door was flung open and Drake hurried into the room, followed by a few of his bodyguards. "What's going on here? Who's causing trouble?" Drake growled as he looked around the room. Kevin was sitting with his back facing the door, so Drake didn't recognize him yet. One of the people whispered to the others, "This is Drake. He's the head of security here." They all knew the place he had in Chicago's underworld. Suddenly, Blair had an idea. He straightened out his tie and walked towards Drake with a smile on his face. "Hello, sir. I wonder if you still remember me," Blair said warmly. "My father and I brought some gifts to Mitchell Cook's birthday party." When his breakfast companions heard that he knew someone like Drake, they were very impressed. "Who are you?" Drake replied brusquely. "Did you throw the glass? I don't like troublemakers." Blair's face froze. He immediately pointed at Kevin and explained excitedly, "Sir, I'm Sherwin Blair. Perhaps you've heard of me. I'm not the one causing trouble today. He's the one who broke the wine glass. He was also very rude to my girlfriend. Please, show him the exit for me," Blair said pretentiously. However, Drake didn't seem to hear what he was saying. He was frowning and staring at Kevin's back. Kevin took a sip of his coffee and said, "Drake, are you really sure you want to do that?" "Be careful how you talk to this man," Blair scolded him. They were all very upset by Kevin's attitude and were afraid that Drake would take it out on them all. Just then, Drake reached out and took Blair forcibly by the elbow. "What's the meaning of this?" the man asked. He had no idea why Drake was doing this. "Stay right here," Drake growled at him. After saying this, he slowly walked over and stood in front of Kevin. As everyone watched in amazement, Drake offered his hand and apologized. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Williams. This is all my fault. I didn't recognize you right away, sir," Drake said nervously. "You could have heard a pin drop."